Trigger on! Welcome, D-Roll, to the Duckface Diaries. We are a World Trigger read-through podcast aiming to discuss the World Trigger manga volume by volume. I'm Wensleydale Cheddar.
I'm Hoven with an H, and this week we'll be handling Volume 1, which covers chapters 1 to 7, or for anime viewers, that's episodes 1 to 4. How have you been doing?
As well as you can be doing at the quarantine, kind of terrified of what the prospect of my MA is going to look like. Anyway.
Everything is on fire! Yeah, my coping mechanism at the moment has been reading World Trigger. I remember in episode 0, I was making my way through the anime, and I'm now finished with that, and I am about 20 chapters shy of catching up, so I've been really chugging away at it.
You've been doing a Twitter thread, it's hashtag changes the new hoves, right?
Yes, as a reference to the incredibly catchy first opening of the anime. I guess if you are a more up-to-date reader, or you don't mind spoilers, give that a look-see. I would always appreciate that. But yeah, if you are a newcomer and you want to go in blind, then you want to stick with this episode.
We'll try for this podcast to be spoiler-free past those 7 chapters. If we feel like we want to do a spoiler, we'll do a section at the end of our general thoughts, I guess. For today's plans, we are going to do a quick recap of the first volume. We'll give our general thoughts mostly afterwards, but also in the midst of it if we feel like we have some observations. Then we'll kind of do observations that we haven't mentioned, and after that, answer a few of your questions.
Yes.
Alright, so let's start with the summary. So, Chapter 1 of World Trigger starts with the iconic scene of Jin rescuing Osama from the Bouncer, from the Trine Soldier, the creature machine from another world, doesn't matter.
They look a lot like the big flying fish things from the first Avengers movie.
Yeah, that's essentially what they are. It's followed by the iconic 2-page spread of the 4 main characters, Osamu, Yuma, Chika, and Jin, standing in a negative space surrounded by the energy of Trion cubes and displaying their own. The basic poses draw our attention to the lighting effect made by the Trion cubes, and the difference in volume and type already kind of feeling us with a sense of mystery. I really like this 2-page spread. We already ask the questions of why is Osama so small, why are Yuma's and Jin's black? And the background, kind of characteristic in its own way and also resembling outer space, already informs us of the sci-fi setting. So, the following pages give us the exposition about the city where everything happens, Mikado City. We learn that the neighbors arrive through the gates and destroy the city 4 years ago, that Border is established, which is an organization set to defend the city against the invading forces. So we get introduced to Osamu Mikamo, a student so straight-laced and serious, even typical 90s bullies think that, "Hey, you're so cool," for returning another guy's pencil case. And to Yuma Kuga, a shorty transfer student who for some reason can withstand being run over by cars and can knock people over with paper balls. Osamu tries to save the weirdly intimidating kid from the bullies, but despite what seems to be his strong sense of justice, he's hilariously and sympathetically weak. Yuma breaks their legs, because of course he does, but the fight is cut short by a neighbor attack. It's at this point when we find out that our main characters have their own respective secrets. Osama is actually a low-ranking agent of Border, while Yuma, who helps him in dealing with the Bamster, with the Trion Soldier, when he is once again too weak to fight it, is actually a neighbor, a humanoid alien, from a world that doesn't mean to invade Earth, as opposed to the world that did 4 years ago. The second chapter mostly consists of Osamu deciding if he should trust Yuma's good intentions as he tries to teach him the human ways. Yuma keeps beating people up and running into cars. It's great. Ultimately, though, in the next chapter, he agrees to hide Yuma as long as Yuma agrees not to draw Border's attention too much, which he's already done considering Miwa Squad is on his trail. We also find out that the warp gates the Trion soldiers are attacking through are condensed to the one no-go zone we see in Chapter 1 by Border, which is the reason why the citizens can live in relative safety. However, This is instantly contradicted as then 2 Trine soldiers attack the school. Owen?
Osamu declares that he will stop the neighbours despite Yuma's severe warnings, activating his trigger and outing himself as a border agent to his classmates. While he fends them off long enough for the students to evacuate, he's quickly overpowered and turns back from his Trion body into his regular one. After trying to deduce a way for him to help Osamu while not being detected, seeing as, using his actual trigger might attract some attention, Yuma swoops in and borrows his trigger, saving him. And I've got to say, I think the panel of him taking Osamu's trigger at the end of Chapter 4 is my favourite image in this whole volume. It's such a cool visual. I love the way his hair and his clothes are swirling around. I love the contrast of it to the rest of the spread. It looks great. So, trying to fend off the Marmot, which is what this class of Trion soldier is called, defensively, he finds Osamu's training trigger is worn out quickly, so opts for a more offensive approach, taking out both of its legs and cutting it in half with a backslash. Another one approaches, climbing the building, but he quickly dispatches it with a stab through the window. When Osamu expresses confusion at how different the capabilities of the trigger are in Yuma's hands, this small black... It's described as the round black throaty thing by Ashihara, robot figure that's been talking to Yuma all volume emerges and introduces itself as Replica, his self-professed chaperone, and explains the basics of Trion to Osamu. We now find out that it's this biological power source created by this invisible gland, that the gland's function and capabilities vary depending on the individual. While Osamu's safe classmates cheer him on as he emerges, the activity has attracted the attention of Arashiyama Squad, a unit of A-rank agents from Border. The squad is confused that the neighbour threat already seems to be neutralised, at which point Osamu just comes forward and claims that he's the one who did it, breaking the rules of what a trainee in his position is allowed to do with these sorts of threats, since he is only in Squad C. So the response from this team is quite split. The squad captain praises his actions, because he's this overly doting brother of the 2 students that go there, and even says he'll vouch for Osamu when he goes back to HQ. Kitora, another member of the squad, is much more skeptical, and she reprimands Osamu for his reckless behaviour. Her and Yuma butt heads a lot in these chapters. They clearly differ they're quite opposed to each other on both how Osamu should be handled and also how important Border is. Ultimately, it's decided that some higher-ups at Border will be the ones to decide the course of action taken against Osamu, and in class the next day, Kitora comes along and picks him up. As they are walking to HQ, Kitora does then reveal that there have been other similar incidents of abnormal gates in the city, outs that the engineers at Border are trying to figure out, and they've not announced this yet in order to prevent mass panic. And at that very moment, a new gate opens right near them, and a new type of Trion soldier, an Ilgar, emerges from it, and it starts to let off all these bombs and causes panic among the public. Both Osamu and Kitora activate their Trion bodies, but Osamu's trigger won't form since his Trion still hasn't fully recovered. So Kitora tells him confidently that she'll handle the threat on her own, and that's where the volume ends. So, I guess we could go through general thoughts?
Yeah. So, I've changed my opinion on these chapters quite a bit. I didn't particularly dislike them at the start, as some people did, like Weekly Manga Recap, the podcast through which we found out about this, just counting the duck faces, which I suppose we should make a habit out of from the next podcast on count the duck faces in every chapter. Yeah, it's generally agreed that the first stretch of World Trigger is not very grabbing, but honestly, I gained a new appreciation for those early chapters.
I think for me, this volume, I'm still not the biggest fan of Chapter 1, but as the volume goes along, it really wins me over, pretty much from the word go with Chapter 2. I found the 90s bullies stuff a bit too stock and generic.
Yeah.
Just like, Osamu is downtrodden by these bullies, he's just this typical nerdy kid, and then this fish out of water character who doesn't understand the world, with his very simple understanding, just takes them out. It's kind of a dumb thing. And then immediately with Chapter 2, we have that really funny interaction between Yuma and Osamu as they're walking back from him taking out the neighbor. And he's just like spilling all this stuff about the neighbors, and then he realizes he probably shouldn't just be spilling it all. It's like, oh, Forget that. I'm not a neighbor. I am very Japanese.
Very Japanese.
Very Japanese. And that's where the series' charm really starts to come in for me.
I certainly appreciate first and the second chapter in different ways. I kind of had mixed thoughts in that I thought that the first chapter had a great hook and an exposition, even though there is certainly an over-reliance on bully characters. I thought it was great in presenting the characterization of both the main characters. And second and the third chapter, while being great comedy and great in developing the dynamic between the main duo, are not a great follow-up as a hook, if that makes sense.
They don't advance the plot a huge amount.
Yeah, I've found the kind of meandering, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's the very interesting thing about World Trigger is the lack of a conventional hook. What most shonen battle series tend to do is they put, like, this is the protagonist, this is their goal, watch them climb towards that goal as the inciting incident. Whereas here, the inciting incident is Yuma meeting Osamu, and the two of them learning about the world, and that's at the forefront. And the goal, we don't know Kuga's goal early on, and Osamu doesn't really have a goal besides just keep his head down. And it's only through the events of the series as they unfold that Osamu manages to gain one.
As we learn later on, he actually does have kind of a goal, but again, we won't learn that until later.
Yeah. And one thing I like is that, like, both of them need to learn respective areas of their world, but there are things that both of them don't know. You get a very strong sense in these early chapters that Yuma is a lost child. Even though he is very confident in certain things, he isn't all-knowing about the neighbor worlds. And whereas Osamu, he has the civilian perspective in this first volume. There are certain things he doesn't know, like he has no idea that triggers are from other worlds, he doesn't know what Trion is, and through getting more involved with Border over the course of the series, he becomes more privy to that. So they're very good audience point of view characters for learning more about this setting.
Yeah, being a C rank definitely helps in the audience kind of self-inserting into Osamu as they find out more about this organization on the mother planet, I suppose.
Mm.
But yeah, I found these chapters a great way to establish what's to come in the rest of the series, although the rest of the series does differ quite a bit from this early start, which ties into one of the questions that we're going to answer later.
We'll get to that when we get to that, I guess.
For WMR, it was around chapter 20 before they started liking World Trigger. For me, I think it's when Kitora arrives is when it starts being particularly entertaining. Because I love Tamakoma too, but Osamu, Kitora, and Yuma have such an entertaining dynamic. With Kitora being such a stickler to the rules and such a hierarchy stan.
Yeah, and I really like that in these initial chapters, she at first seems like super above it, cooler than you, and then deep down, you see her in a monologue, and she's just really like, what the hell? How is this trainee so good? I couldn't do that. And you kind of see that she's posturing a bit, and it's very amusing.
Yeah, she's a great character. Yuma kind of seeing through her bullshit, through her pride, and Osamu being caught between the two of them bickering. It's great.
Like, that is one thing we see a bit of in this volume, that, like, Osamu, it's not really clarified how, but he has a knack for telling when people are lying. And he does this with Kitora, and he does this with the scammer in Chapter 2, who is trying to get him to give him loads of money for his dead dad. Dead dad in inverted commas.
Yeah, you meant Yuma, yeah. Not Osamu.
Yuma, yes. Yes, you're right.
Osamu, I love this character. I love that the author kind of has a dismissive relationship with him. Osamu, and I can't stress this enough, likes bridges.
I love that. The volume comments in World Trigger are some of the best in any manga that I've read. And I love them.
Ashihara kind of loves shitting on Osamu in his author notes. He makes fun of him for not having too many friends.
A straightforward character whose only initial character description was guy with the glasses. If you collect 50 Osamus without a sweat drop, you can exchange them for a chance to win one golden Osamu. And then, like, another one I love is the volume comments where he's like, explaining the differences between the kinds of Treon soldiers. And he's like,
Oh, yes!
It's embarrassing Osamu lost to a Bamster, and then Osamu shouldn't be ashamed of losing to a Marmot.
Ashihara has a great sense of humor, and we've only seen kind of a glimpse of that. But it's such a great hook for what's to come.
One very interesting thing I got for the dynamic between Osamu and Yuma is that it's just like a neat feature in that in the early chapters, in those chapters 2 and 3, Yuma is very much saying sometimes you need to break the rules, and Osamu is very steadfast. He's got that keep his head down kind of attitude, which hasn't actually been working out for him. But then that sets up in chapters 3 and 4 when he breaks the rules in order to save his classmates. I like that Yuma is the inciting incident for that.
Yeah. I do love his general tendency to kind of get roped into events bigger than him and then gaining all the glory despite himself.
So yeah, I found the border uniform at default was very practical, the trainee one. It had sort of a jumpsuit janitor sort of look, whereas Arashiyama's squads is much more jumpsuit-like. So we're already setting up that there's quite a variety in how these uniforms look.
Something that also hits close to home for me in this chapter was how quickly kind of people in Mikado City adjusted to regular invasions. Something that should be a national emergency yet becomes a part of everyday life. Business owners pushing for workers to infect the grandmas and sacrifice them to appease the economy and all. Yeah.
Yeah, and also you have that chapter with Osamu's classmates talking about how great Border is and how they feel much more safer because of the guidance beacons. I also found it interesting how the initial formation in chapter 1 on the first couple of threads is very much told from the civilians' point of view of oh, they just suddenly appeared, they seemingly came out of nowhere. And it also very much establishes Mikado City as the center of this world. It's this very constant hub that surprisingly few people leave, and then the classmates say not many people transfer into when Yuma transfers into the class, so that's quite striking. It's sort of the epicenter that we know of for the vast bulk of this series going forward. So, to go back to chapter 1, I found the art really came into its own in chapter 2. The art in chapter 1 isn't that bad, but it's a little bit bland, particularly in a lot of the classroom scenes. Whereas, in chapter 2, you have a lot of cool panels, the close up on Yuma taking the hit and taking the hit from the car, and he's all there's a smoking wound there, and there's a really cool sort of densely shaded aspect to the way his face looks.
That is completely fair, but I think you're also kind of used to not really doing night scenes a lot. Makes every time when he's doing night scenes, it makes them particularly stand out.
I also think you immediately get a good sense of Yuma and Replica's relationship, with Replica constantly urging him on with advice, but ultimately cannot make decisions for him. He has the final say.
It's a relationship that we see through a large part of the series, and it's quite well developed and heartbreaking in places.
It's also when Osamu gets beaten up by the bullies, he complains it's not fair to gang up on someone, and Yuma just comes in isn't that how a fight works? And strength in numbers becomes a very recurring factor in this series, so it's nice that they planted the seeds for that so early on.
Yeah, Ashihara definitely has a very down-to-earth approach to combat.
Which is neat. The panel layout and the spacing in action scenes is quite strong. It contrasts the talkie scenes, which are very a lot of it is just quite a conventional series of panels. It's just very functional, and then in the action scenes, they shine a lot more. In terms of showing off the combat, I don't think this does a huge amount, but one detail I did like was the fight with Yuma using the trigger against the two Marmods. The fact that he uses Osamu's trigger to grind along the wall, the use of space being quite important, and the fact that he's able to use the tight space to his advantage is very indicative of the kind of approach to combat Ashihara has.
It also kind of establishes how different Yuma's fighting style is from the Border agents due to his upbringing.
I also think like at the end of chapter 1, Jin's introduction and the parallel with Yuma, they very much signal the forward thrust of the story moving into Border, and that's what the hook is, like seeing them move more into Border and find more about it. Interesting that the first other Border agents we see are Yonaya and Miwa. The very interesting way this series handles its tertiary cast is that, I guess that struck me, is that they tend not to be as individually important as I would have assumed. Like, often with shonen, it's like, oh, this is the mentor figure, and this is the rival, and this series kind of has a lot of the above, a lot of different cases that have different kinds of dynamics. It's more spread out.
The series operates its cast in kind of groups and social trends, if that makes sense. I don't want to get into this now, but how basically different characters have responded to the Border invasion, and within that social trends and within that groups, we also see those kind of individual responses in that.
I really like. I also one thing I forgot: the fact that Border had memory wiping technology. This completely blanked me as someone quite deep in the series. This is something they did to regular civilians. There's a lot of emphasis on how Border tries to make sure public panic isn't widespread, and some of it is a bit like, oh, that's a bit dodge. I did really like Kuga using the bully's muscle memory against him. This is like, while I found like a lot of the bully owning in chapter 1 a bit stock, this was quite amusing. Yeah, this is also ties in with one of the volume facts that I really like. One of the bullies is a rich kid with very good grades who apparently, according to Ashihara, just does the bully thing on the side.
He's basically Jumanji from the Haha brothers from Ishal 21, except he's not the ringleader this time.
This is getting ahead a bit, but chapter 3 establishes the calamities of the initial neighbour attack. Is this what later gets referred to as the first large-scale invasion? The effects end up tying into quite a few character backstories. So, yeah, it's interesting that we got that set up. I like the detail on, like, Miss Mizunama, the teacher, in the volume comments. She's probably popular with the students.
I didn't pay attention to her design at all, but I think she's very popular.
Another design-related volume comment that I found notable was Fudatatsu and Ichinose, two of Osama's classmates, being swapped around from the typical artsy and sporty. What? The typical artsy and sporty character type designs. It's kind of a nice meta detail, whereas, like, the one who's got, like, the longer hair and kind of the look you'd associate in a manga with art characters is more into sports, and then the tomboyish one with the short hair and the very Genki-looking design. She looks a lot like the Genki one from Azumanga Daioh, and she's the one who's really into the arts. That was kind of neat.
The other male friend of Osamu's, who is not Miyoshi, is tsundere for Miyoshi, in that he secretly likes how Miyoshi is all, I'd like to be a member of Border! Wouldn't you like to be a member of Border? Border is so cool!
There's a great comment from Yuma after the attack on the school. Resist to Osamu, Trion isn't the only reason why you're weak, and that was a nice detail. He can tell that there are other things that Osamu needs to improve on besides just you don't have the big dick energy.
Power level is not the only issue. Yeah.
I really liked Kitora posing for taking a picture outside the school. That was a cute moment of, like, she does have that streak of vanity to her.
You see, I noticed that in the anime. I didn't, unless the pages skipped ahead in the Viz Reader. I haven't noticed that moment in the manga.
No, that was definitely there. It's also like agents we've met so far. I've noticed they tend to skew very young. Most are high school age, with the exception of Asarashiyama, who is college age, which I think gives you a very good sense that this new paradigm of border protecting people from invasions is relatively new, and a lot of the people working for it are quite young. And then I guess the last comment I have is that I think exposition was handled fairly naturally, and this is a recurring thing. Like, Kitora boasting to Osamu is a really good way for it to introduce her explaining the ranking system. I know in, like, the author comments, Ashihara cites Replica as a good get-out-of-jail-free card for this. Okay, sorry. I'm going through a lot of these. But, like, there is one more, which was in the, at the end of volume little character profiles. They talk about, like, he talks more about Kitora, and he said, my editor said, the readers might not like her personality, so her bust side was increased to counterbalance that. Which is really funny, because Ashihara's approach to this sort of thing is so much more tame than any other Jump mangaka.
Yeah, this comment is pretty famous, and I love Ashihara's sense of humor.
Yeah, it's also the editor was a bit of a prophet, because the readers, she isn't hugely popular compared to the rest of the female cast. Maybe we'll get to the popularity poll 17 volumes deep in this. We'll see how long we keep at this, I guess. But she doesn't rate that highly compared to quite a lot of the rest of the cast, so I guess the editor was onto something.
Fair enough.
Yeah, anyway, that covers my extensive notes. Feel free to edit out any of that if it was dragging on a bit. But yeah, we can go on to questions now.
Right. Moving on to questions. So the first questions we have is, I'm going to pull the Discord up because I forgot. Okay. So from Sharpest Tool in the Shed on Twitter, the only question that matters, cutest operator, let the war begin. So I guess here's where we get to the spoilers, because we're gonna talk about the characters that you don't know about.
It's not like a major spoiler, but we don't get any operators introduced in this volume, so newcomers will have no context for this whatsoever. My favourite, I think I made this clear in episode 0, is Usami. I like her very nurturing approach to the other characters, like Chika in particular, and she's got a lot of very goofy disposition, which I like.
Usami is great. Do you know, through my work on the Brit series, I've come to take notes on a lot of minor characters. Do you remember Yu Kunichika, the Tachikawa squad operator?
Does she have kind of scruffy hair, and she likes to, like, watch records of the flight loads?
That's, okay, you're confusing two characters. The one who likes point records is Sakurako.
Oh, okay, yes.
Who I also have a soft spot for, because she is, after all, a podcaster like us. My favourite, probably in terms of dynamic with her squad, is Yuka Nichiko, the Tachikawa squad operator, who has kind of a sleepy, dopey personality, which is quite charming.
Yes, I see now, yes.
And it's one of my favourite moments of the series where Osamu goes to Tachikawa squad to learn more about weapons from probably the top shooter in the ranks. Tachikawa comes to explain about the logo of the squad. This is my sword, this is Izumi's sword, and the third one is also my sword because I have two. And she asks, where am I? Oh, you're the crescent moon on the back. Oh, that's a good position. Yeah, I love that moment.
Nice. So FGC Sharpest Tool in the Shed, has another question for us, which is the best moments. I think I already listed mine. It was the moment where Yuma takes Osamu's trigger, and you get that cool panel of him powering up with it. I really like that one. Well, what about you?
I guess they're asking about the best moments in the series. We're gonna get a lot of questions like that. If we get these, I guess we're gonna talk about the best moments from the volumes themselves. We're reading currently. For me, it was from chapter 2 when Yuma, first he breaks the bones of a bully who is trying to steal cash from him. Osamu tells him, no, Yuma, it's not good. You're drawing attention to yourself. Please don't do that. Another set of bullies approach him. Osamu comes back to Yuma and he's like, don't worry, Osamu, this time I haven't broken the bones. I think.
Yeah, no, that was a good moment.
On Reddit, Randall Jr. 55 asks, okay, since this episode is about Volume 1, here's a hopefully good, relevant question. What do you think the series would have been if it focused on the setup from Chapter 2, where Osamu is in school while also being a secret border agent trying to teach Yuma the neighbor about Japan? What do you think?
Yeah, I found these chapters, again, to go on, I found the early chapters a little more generic, so I feel like if the series had just focused on that, it wouldn't have stood out from the crowd among other shonen manga nearly as much. I think it being in here isn't without merit. I do like that these early chapters have the perspective of a citizen and are told solely from that. And it is also nice getting the basics of Yuma learning about Japan, but I don't think we needed any more of it.
I feel like if we focus more on that, it still would have to lead to border at some point. Probably the classmates would be more fleshed out and would probably have to be implemented as agents, because otherwise we would have a situation like in Bleach, where the premise changed significantly and the main characters, after a certain point, we weren't sure who the main characters were. I feel like Ashihara could pull it off, could keep the setting more outside border, but his comedy is excellent, but it couldn't stay pure comedy for long, I feel like.
Alright, so the next question from VXX Neko, nickname HughesXTFist on Twitter, asks, first impression on Yuma in terms of power and overall character. So, I guess from this volume alone, we have a pretty strong sense as Yuma as an overdog. He's easily the strongest character we've met so far, and I think his characterization is very clear. I like the detail that he likens school uniform to military uniforms. Like, that is his experience with uniform that we can glean from this. It makes you question what kind of life he must have had. And then the close-up on Yuma's dead-eye stare initially could be read as like a joke, just like, oh, he's intimidating the teacher so much when the teacher tries to take his ring from him. But in hindsight, it's a memento from my father was completely accurate, and this is just his honest response.
I think Yuma's great. I like his dynamic with Osamu and Kitora a lot. He is a little shithead, but he also has this kind of sense of honesty and naivete in his inexperience with Earth. I think strikes a good balance. He's a very comical character in a way, but he never becomes too annoying. Yeah, I like him a lot, even though I will appreciate him a lot more in the next few volumes.
Yeah, I think a lot of the forward thrust with World Trigger is sort of having a better sense of knowing where things are going is a great assurance. So knowing that they're going to commit long term to this slow build underdog story with Osamu, and knowing that like Kuga isn't just meant to be this all-knowing, on top of things, get out of jail free card. That he does have limitations, and that like Osamu people need to be careful with how they use him, and use him appropriately. That is definitely the direction the series takes with him.
Right then.
At Mitsuru's_sleaze on Twitter asks us if our podcast is available on Spotify, which I think that means we can segue a bit into where we can find the podcast.
Right then. So yes, the podcast is available on Spotify and on many other podcast hosting sites.
Yeah, we've expanded to quite a few since episode 0. So you can find it on Anchor FM/Wensleydale Cheddar. You can find it at Podbean, Wensleydale8001.podbean.com. You can find it here. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts. All of the links in the description below.
Anchor.fm/Wensleydale Cheddar is where you can find your preferred link, and send us your emails, questions, comments, suggestions to wensleydale012@gmail.com. Or otherwise, you can at us on Twitter. I'm at WensleyCheddar.
You can find me at home with an H on Twitter. I've got my ongoing manga threads. I'm usually rattling on and on about something or the other like that. And you can find me, I'm hoping with an H on YouTube. And if you'd like us to upload these on a regular basis, you can drop Wensleydale a few dollars on Patreon at patreon.com/WensleydaleCheddar. That's what pays the bills for him.
Yeah, in return for your support, you get access to rewards such as an entire backlog of manga and anime reviews. At just the $1 tier, you can access our bonus mini podcast series where I Draw Shitty Art and I watch through the entirety of the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime. And if you'd like me to edit more of World Trigger Abridged, it's also a goal on Patreon, so check that out if you have any disposable income.
Next month, we're covering Volume 2, so be sure to read chapters 8 through 16 or watch episodes 5 through 8.
So this was the first episode of Duckface Diaries, and as always, it's time to bugger off!